Hello, esteemed gentlemen. Not all men who walk alone are lost. Some just refuse to march to a beat that was never theirs. Society loves its boxes, alpha, beta, gamma, neatly labeled, stacked, and predictable. But here's the catch. Research shows that nearly 70% of people secretly admit they feel out of sync with social expectations, even if they never say it out loud. That's where the Sigma male comes in. The man who doesn't just step outside the hierarchy but rips the blueprint in half and redraws it. He's not loud, not needy, not climbing ladders just to prove he's on top. In fact, half the time he doesn't even acknowledge there is a ladder. And while everyone else is busy playing king of the hill, the Sigma male has already built his own mountain, silently, unapologetically, and sometimes with a smirk at how frantic the rest look. So, if you've ever felt like you're not wired like other men, like you're playing a completely different game while everyone else is stuck fighting over the same prize, you might just be walking the Sigma path. Let's find out. Number 1. You don't buy into the male ego exchange. You don't buy into the male ego exchange, and that separates you from almost every man around you. Most men live in a silent marketplace where the currency is ego. They exaggerate their achievements, flex their possessions, talk louder than necessary, or posture in ways that scream for recognition. It's not always obvious, but if you pay attention, you see it everywhere. Men trading inflated stories, fake confidence, and shallow dominance to earn points in the eyes of other men. It's a constant auction of approval, but you don't participate. You never feel the urge to perform for validation. If anything, the idea of having to prove yourself in that childish barter system feels beneath you. You don't inflate, you don't compete for attention, and you don't waste breath trying to outshine someone who's clearly desperate to be noticed. That absence of performance is precisely what makes you stand out. While others are locked in a cycle of posturing, you're free, and that freedom feels unsettling to men who measure their worth by comparison. This refusal isn't about arrogance, it's about authenticity. You'd rather let your actions speak quietly than scream your worth into a room. You know that a man who has to constantly declare how powerful he is usually isn't. A man who brags endlessly about success often fears it's temporary, and a man who demands respect almost never gets it. By stepping out of the ego exchange, you expose the insecurity of those who can't live without it. What makes your stance even more disruptive is that you don't reward the performance of others either. You don't hand out validation for bragging, and you don't feel pressured to applaud inflated egos just to keep the peace. This is why some men feel uneasy around you. They sense that their usual tricks, boasting, flexing, overcompensating, don't work in your presence. They're used to people playing along, and your refusal to engage quietly dismantles their act. The result? You carry a kind of quiet authority that can't be bought or traded. You don't need the male ego exchange to confirm your worth. You've already decided it for yourself. That's what makes you different. Where most men live like performers desperate for applause, you live like an author who doesn't care who claps. And in that silence, you command more respect than all their noise combined. Number 2, you don't have a default setting. You don't have a default setting, and that's what sets you apart. Most men fall neatly into pre-packaged molds, alpha with their dominance displays, beta with their eager compliance, and everyone else orbiting those two poles like satellites. They copy what seems to work for others and paste it into their lives, hoping it will give them direction, respect, or at the very least acceptance. But you? You never signed up for the template. You built your own operating system from scratch, even if it makes people uneasy. From the way you think to the choices you make, there's no pre-written script guiding you. You're not following the rule book of how a man should act according to society, culture, or even the current internet trend. While others try to fit the alpha's armor or the beta's chains, you've created something far more dangerous to conformity: unpredictability. People can't pin you down, and that unsettles them. They're used to dealing with men who can be categorized and predicted, but with you, there's no default mode to rely on. You operate outside their systems, which means they can't control you. This is why people often mistake you for rebellious or difficult when in reality you're just original. You'd rather build your life brick by brick than live in a house designed by someone else. And it's not about rejecting authority for the sake of rebellion. It's about refusing to live as a copy. You know instinctively that what works for others may not work for you, and you'd rather face uncertainty than wear an ill-fitting identity. The irony is that this unnerves people even when you're not trying. Your presence alone reminds them of their own compromises. It's easier for them to follow a template because templates feel safe. But you expose the weakness of that safety net simply by existing outside of it. You're living proof that a man doesn't need to fit into pre-labeled categories to have direction, confidence, and influence. You don't have a default setting because you were never meant to run on someone else's programming. You're not a copy, not a template, not a version of anything that already exists. You're an original, and that's exactly why you can't be boxed in or broken down like the rest. Number 3, your emotions don't own you. Your emotions don't own you, and that's one of the rarest forms of strength a man can possess. Most people believe that feeling deeply means being consumed by those feelings. But for you, it works differently. You're not numb and you're not detached. You feel everything with full intensity. Anger, love, disappointment, joy, sadness. They all reach you. But the difference is, you don't hand over the steering wheel of your life to them. Where other men let a surge of anger dictate their actions or let infatuation blind their judgment, you stand back and observe your emotions like a storm passing through. You acknowledge them without letting them rewrite your choices. This ability doesn't make you cold, it makes you precise. You understand that emotions are powerful messengers but terrible masters. They can inform you about what matters, but they should never command the direction of your life. That's why people often mistake your calmness for not caring. In reality, you care so much that you refuse to let a fleeting mood ruin something permanent. You can walk away from arguments before they become disasters. You can stay loyal even when temptation tries to pull you. And you can remain focused while others are crumbling under emotional weight. It also makes you highly unpredictable. In a world where men's reactions are usually easy to provoke, yours are impossible to script. People expect anger when they push your buttons, but instead, they meet silence. They expect excitement when they dangle bait, but you remain steady. This leaves others confused, sometimes even intimidated, because they can't manipulate or predict a man who doesn't react on cue. What sets you apart is that you've turned emotions into tools, not chains. Anger becomes fuel for discipline. Sadness deepens your understanding of others. Even heartbreak becomes wisdom rather than a lifelong wound. You don't suppress what you feel. You channel it in ways that sharpen your vision instead of blinding it. This level of emotional self-mastery is rare, and it's the reason people can't figure you out. They can't read you like an open book because you've learned to hold the pen. You feel deeply, but you live deliberately. And in a world where men are either ruled by their rage or numbed by their detachment, you stand out as someone who can feel everything without being owned by anything. Number 4, you have a predator's patience. You have a predator's patience, and that alone makes you a different breed. Most men live in a constant rush, rushing to prove themselves, rushing to respond, rushing to grab whatever scraps of validation they can find. They act before thinking, speak before understanding, and jump before measuring the ground beneath them. But not you. You know that real power isn't in constant motion. It's in knowing when to move and when to stay absolutely still. You don't waste energy chasing every opportunity or responding to every challenge. Instead, you observe, quietly, carefully, deliberately. While others exhaust themselves by sprinting after every distraction, you conserve your strength. You wait. You study the terrain, the people, and the patterns that others overlook in their desperation. And when the moment finally comes, you strike with a precision that makes your actions look effortless, almost surgical. This unnerves people because they mistake your silence for passivity. They think you're inactive, that you've been left behind. But what they don't realize is that your stillness is strategy. You're not frozen, you're calculating, and when you finally move, you bypass months of noise, mistakes, and wasted energy that others have piled up in their impatience. Your patience is also what protects you. In relationships, in business, in conflict, you don't rush into traps. You're not seduced by urgency, which is how most men are manipulated. Deadlines, emotional ultimatums, peer pressure, none of it works on you. Because you know urgency is often a disguise for weakness, and that waiting exposes truth faster than pressure ever could. The beauty of this patience is that it multiplies your impact. You don't need to act 100 times to be noticed. You act once, and it lands so cleanly that it changes everything. People often wonder how you always seem to get it right when you finally move. But the truth is, you've been preparing all along. They confuse luck with calculation, but you know better. This kind of patience is rare in a world addicted to speed, and that's exactly why it works in your favor. While others burn themselves out in endless motion, you conserve your power for when it actually matters. And when you finally decide the time is right, you don't just play the game, you end it. Number 5. You operate on delayed recognition. You operate on delayed recognition, and that's something most men can't handle. In today's world, everyone is obsessed with instant validation, likes, applause, promotions, praise. They want proof that what they're doing matters right now, otherwise they feel invisible. But you've made peace with the long game. You don't need the spotlight today because you know your worth often takes years to register. You understand that true value isn't always obvious in the moment. It reveals itself over time. This patience with recognition makes you different. While others exhaust themselves chasing attention, you quietly build. You work, you create, you grow, often without anyone clapping in the background. You're not addicted to the dopamine hit of quick approval, and that makes your moves more deliberate. You don't waste energy trying to impress people who won't matter in the long run. Instead, you plant seeds, fully aware that some may not bear fruit until long after others have stopped watching. What unsettles people is that they can't figure out why you don't seem to care about being acknowledged. They mistake your calm for indifference, when in reality it's discipline. You're not chasing applause because you know that applause fades fast. The man who needs recognition today often becomes irrelevant tomorrow. You've chosen a harder but far more rewarding path, building a legacy that will speak louder years from now than a cheer ever could today. This is why many only begin to understand you in hindsight. The moves you made that seemed strange or reckless to others eventually reveal themselves as brilliant. The solitude they mocked becomes clarity. The risks they laughed at become wins they wish they'd taken. By the time they connect the dots, you're already miles ahead, no longer concerned with proving them wrong. The proof is in the results. Operating on delayed recognition means you're not living for approval, you're living for alignment. You measure success not by who claps now, but by the strength and permanence of what you've built. And when the recognition does come, it hits differently, because it's not shallow or fleeting. It's earned. That's why your name lasts in conversations long after louder men have been forgotten. You don't demand recognition in the moment, because you know time itself is the loudest applause. Number 6. You keep your power ambiguous. You keep your power ambiguous, and that ambiguity is what makes you so hard to read, let alone control. Most men announce themselves before they even open their mouths. You can tell who's desperate for respect, who's chasing validation, and who's bluffing strength from a mile away. They show their cards too early, through loud talk, obvious gestures, or predictable behaviors. You don't. You stay unreadable. People can never quite pin you down, and that uncertainty keeps you one step ahead. The beauty of your ambiguity is that it forces others into a guessing game. They can't decide if you're the calmest man in the room or the most dangerous. They don't know if you're disinterested or simply observing. They can't tell if you're holding back because you're passive or because you're calculating. That haze unsettles people because human beings crave predictability. When they can't read you, they can't prepare for you. And when they can't prepare, they feel vulnerable. This isn't about pretending or playing games. It's about restraint. You don't feel the need to constantly prove your strength, so you leave space for others to wonder. That space is your advantage. While loud men overexpose themselves, you conserve your power and let people's imagination do the heavy lifting. And the truth is, Imagination often paints you as more formidable than you'd ever claim out loud. This ambiguity also protects you. By not revealing your full hand, you make it impossible for manipulators to exploit you. They can't weaponize your weaknesses if they can't identify them. They can't trap you in their games if they don't even know what game you're playing. Your silence, your calm, your controlled responses, they all become armor that shields you without needing to be aggressive. But here's what makes it even more interesting. The few times you do reveal power, it lands 10 times harder because no one expects it. The man who never needed to flex, suddenly moving with precision, leaves a lasting mark. It's like a quiet storm breaking without warning. It doesn't just make people notice, it makes them rethink everything they assumed about you. Keeping your power ambiguous isn't about being mysterious for the sake of mystery. It's about leverage. You've learned that when people can't define you, they can't confine you. And that's why your greatest advantage isn't how much power you have, but how little anyone can predict what you'll do with it. Number 7. You see through masculine masks instantly. You see through masculine masks instantly. That's one of the sharpest and most unsettling traits of a Sigma male. Other men spend years crafting a public image, layering on bravado, pretending to be tougher, richer, or more important than they really are. They perfect their laugh, adjust their tone, wear the right clothes, and even copy the body language of whoever they admire, all in an attempt to project dominance. Most people buy it, but not you. You catch the crack in the performance almost immediately. The reason is simple. You don't rely on surface-level cues to measure a man's strength. You've seen enough to know that loudness doesn't equal confidence, and that material success doesn't always equal real power. You pay attention to micro-behaviors, the flicker in the eyes, the pause before a sentence, the way someone tenses up when challenged. You catch the signs of insecurity that most others are too distracted to notice. While some men take another's performance at face value, you sense what's hiding underneath: the fear, the doubt, the desperation. This is unsettling for people because it strips away their protective armor. Men who are used to being admired for their loud confidence feel naked in front of someone who isn't fooled. They sense that you don't buy the act, and it rattles them. They can't quite put their finger on why you make them uncomfortable, but deep down, they know you've seen through their disguise. You've read them before they even had a chance to present their script. What makes this ability even more powerful is that you don't use it to humiliate or call people out. You don't need to. Just knowing that you see the truth gives you an unspoken authority. Other men waste energy trying to prove themselves, while you silently disarm them by refusing to participate in the game. Your presence alone exposes how fragile their performance is. In a world full of posturing, this ability separates you from the crowd. It's not about being judgmental, it's about being unshakably perceptive. You know when someone is truly strong, when they're quietly secure in themselves, and when they're just building a mask to hide behind. And that makes you different, not because you choose to stand out, but because you can't help but see what others miss. Number 8. You're unreachable to most people's manipulation. You're unreachable to most people's manipulation. And that's one of the most liberating yet intimidating traits you carry. The majority of men are tethered to invisible strings: approval, belonging, and fear of rejection. Society knows this and uses it as currency, guilt-tripping them into compliance, shaming them into obedience, or dangling acceptance like a reward for good behavior. It works on almost everyone, but not on you. You've cut those strings, and that makes you untouchable. Guilt trips bounce off you because you don't measure your worth by someone else's disappointment. Group pressure doesn't sway you because you'd rather walk alone with clarity than march with a crowd that's lost. Social shaming, the weapon most people dread, barely grazes you because exclusion holds no power over a man who never needed inclusion to begin with. This drives people mad. They're used to manipulation working like a remote control. Press the right button, get the desired reaction. But with you, the buttons don't respond. It unsettles manipulators, frustrates authority figures, and even confuses loved ones who can't guilt you into something you've already decided against. You're not cruel, you're just immune. And immunity looks like defiance to those who thrive on control. What makes this even more powerful is that your resistance isn't loud or defensive. It's silent and steady. You don't argue with the guilt tripper. You don't try to convince the mob. You simply don't bend. That quiet refusal is often more unnerving than outright rebellion, because it shows you're not even in the same game they're playing. The truth is, your strength comes from being anchored to your own compass. You don't fear losing status. You don't crave applause, and you don't panic when others disapprove. This makes you the hardest kind of man to corner, because there's nothing anyone can dangle over you that's worth more than your independence. In a world where manipulation is the default language of control, being unreachable makes you rare, dangerous, and deeply respected, even by those who resent you. People can shame, exclude, or whisper all they want, but none of it works on you. Because the truth is simple, you can't be controlled by a system you never agreed to belong to in the first place. Number 9. You'd rather be misunderstood than compromised. You'd rather be misunderstood than compromised. And that truth alone makes you stand apart from nearly every man around you. Most men are desperate to be liked. They shapeshift to fit whatever room they're in, soften their edges to avoid offense, and water themselves down just enough to stay palatable. They don't care if it costs them their identity, as long as they remain approved. But you? You'd rather be painted as difficult, cold, or even the villain in someone else's narrative than live 1 second betraying who you really are. This isn't arrogance, it's integrity. You know that bending too much for acceptance comes with a hidden debt, one that grows heavier the longer you carry it, and you refuse to live indebted to the opinions of others. You've accepted the reality that not everyone will understand you, not everyone will applaud you, and not everyone will stay. But instead of running from that truth, you embrace it. Because at the end of the day, their misunderstanding doesn't change your reality. Compromise does. Being misunderstood actually frees you. It filters out the people who were only ever drawn to a version of you that wasn't real. It exposes who can stand with you in truth, not just in convenience. And yes, sometimes it makes you a target. People who don't get you will invent their own stories about you. They'll call you aloof, stubborn, maybe even selfish. But the irony is, most of those same people secretly admire the fact that you have the spine to stand where they collapsed. What unnerves people is that you don't flinch at being misread. You don't scramble to correct every rumor or beg for clarification. You let the misunderstanding breathe, because you know the truth doesn't need to defend itself. In their eyes, that silence makes you even harder to pin down. In your eyes, it keeps you free. This is why compromise has no appeal to you. It's the quiet death of authenticity, the slow erosion of identity. And you'd rather carry the weight of being misjudged than the far heavier burden of betraying yourself. That's the Sigma edge. You're not here to be universally loved. You're here to live in a way that doesn't leave you looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. And for you, that will always be worth the misunderstanding. Number 10. You're immune to trend programming. You're immune to trend programming, and in today's world, that's almost unheard of. Everything around you is designed to keep men plugged into hype cycles. New clothes that are out of style in 6 months, new slang that expires by next season, and a fresh alpha influencer every week screaming into a camera about how to be a real man. Most people eat it up without question. They're constantly downloading the latest version of someone else's identity, convinced that if they just keep up with the next trend, they'll finally matter. But not you. You remain untouchable, almost allergic to fads. It's not that you're oblivious to trends. You see them clearly. You just recognize them for what they are, tools of conformity. They're manufactured waves, designed to sweep people into sameness while convincing them they're unique. You know better than to drown in that current. You understand that a man who defines himself through trends is really just outsourcing his identity to someone else's marketing strategy. That's why you move differently. While others scramble to catch the wave of whatever's in, you're busy building something that doesn't expire with the next algorithm shift. This is why your style, your language, your way of living feels timeless. You're not chasing relevance. You are relevant because you stand outside the timeline that dictates everyone else's behavior. People notice this even if they can't explain it. They can feel that you're not borrowing your image from the culture. You've authored it yourself. And here's the part that secretly frustrates people. Trends are supposed to make others envious or insecure, but you never flinch. The latest status flex doesn't move you. The flashiest car, the newest shoes, the loudest display of wealth, none of it registers as power in your eyes. That indifference unsettles trend chasers, because deep down they know the things they worship are temporary, and you're proof that real influence doesn't need a label or a hashtag. Being immune to trends makes you rare in a world addicted to validation. While others are constantly updating themselves to fit the newest version of masculinity, you've built an identity that doesn't need updates. And the irony is, because you refuse to play the game, you end up being the one everyone eventually tries to imitate. You're not fashionable, you're untouchable. Number 11. Your energy exposes other men's fragility. Your energy exposes other men's fragility, and you don't even have to try. While some men crank up their volume, puff out their chests, and announce their presence with exaggerated dominance, you don't need theatrics. You walk into a room carrying the kind of grounded calm that speaks louder than all their shouting combined. And that's exactly why it unsettles them. Because without raising your voice, you make their noise look like insecurity on full display. Loud men thrive on performance. They need an audience to validate their worth, to confirm that their posturing actually means something. But when you're there, their act collapses under its own weight. Next to your composure, their attempts at dominance look like children screaming for attention. It's not that you're trying to outshine them, you simply don't play their game. And that refusal exposes the weakness of their strategy. This is why fragile men often dislike you before you even speak. They sense, on some primal level, that you're not buying what they're selling. They feel small next to someone who doesn't need to prove himself with volume, bragging, or ego displays. Their instinct is either to get louder in your presence, desperate to reclaim attention, or to grow uncomfortable and retreat. Either way, your energy has already done its work without you lifting a finger. The irony is that true strength is rarely loud. It's felt, not performed, and that's what makes your presence disruptive. You remind people that power isn't in the shouting, it's in the silence that can't be shaken. You don't posture, and you don't compete for space. You already own your space by being unbothered. Over time, people begin to notice the contrast. They see how others scramble for validation while you remain still, and it forces them to ask themselves uncomfortable questions. Why does he not need what we need? Why is he steady when we're restless? Those questions cut deeper than any confrontation could. Your energy doesn't humiliate other men by design. It simply reveals the truth. And the truth is this: real confidence doesn't yell, it radiates. That's why your calm presence exposes fragility wherever it hides, leaving others to face the uncomfortable gap between who they pretend to be and who they really are. Number 12. Your relationships aren't based on need. Your relationships aren't based on need, and that's why they carry a different kind of weight compared to most. The truth is, a lot of men build connections out of fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of being judged, fear of not measuring up without someone by their side. They cling to people, partners, and groups, not because those bonds truly elevate them, but because they're terrified of solitude. You don't share that fear. You're already complete on your own, which means anyone you allow into your life is there by choice, not desperation. That independence changes everything. When you enter a relationship, whether it's with a friend, a partner, or even a team, you're not showing up as half a man searching for his missing piece. You're showing up whole, grounded, and steady. You're not there to leech validation, to fill a void, or to be rescued from your own silence. You've already made peace with your solitude, and because of that, the people you keep close know you want them, not that you need them. That difference creates bonds that are far more authentic. It also makes you selective in ways others can't always understand. You don't collect people the way some men collect status symbols. You don't hold on to toxic friendships just to avoid being alone on a Friday night. You don't chase relationships that drain you simply to prove you're desirable. For you, the test is simple. Does this person add value? Do they bring depth, growth, or genuine connection into your life? If the answer is no, you'd rather walk alone than drag dead weight. Of course, this unsettles people who are used to being needed as a crutch. When they realize you won't depend on them for your sense of identity, some interpret it as coldness. But the truth is, your independence actually makes your relationships stronger, because when you stay, it's not out of fear, it's out of choice. That makes your loyalty more valuable than 10 men who cling out of necessity. Your relationships aren't chains, they're deliberate connections. And because they're not built on need, they can't be broken by absence, rejection, or loneliness. You don't fear being alone, which is why you'll never settle for people who make you feel lonelier when you're with them. That's the Sigma difference. You don't seek completion, you seek alignment. And that makes your relationships rare. At the end of the day, being a Sigma male isn't about fitting into a new label. It's about breaking every label entirely. You're not built to perform for applause, bend to trends, or fight for a place in someone else's hierarchy. You've mastered patience, resisted manipulation, and chosen truth over comfort, even when it costs you acceptance. While other men trade egos like currency, you move quietly, leaving behind a presence that unsettles, inspires, and lingers. What makes you different isn't noise or dominance, it's depth. You're not chasing recognition because you know time itself will reveal your worth. You're not obsessed with power because your ambiguity is power. You don't need validation because you've already authored your own script. That's why you stand apart, not louder, not flashier, but freer. And maybe that's the real mark of a Sigma male, choosing a life that can't be packaged, predicted, or replicated. A life that unsettles the shallow, exposes the weak, and inspires those brave enough to carve their own path. Not because you want to be followed, but because you refuse to be owned. So if these signs resonated with you, maybe it's not that you're different from other men. Maybe it's that you finally stopped trying to be like them at all. And in a world addicted to imitation, that's the rarest strength of all. If this resonated with you, if you felt that sharp pull of recognition in even one of these signs, then don't just walk away and forget it. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel is built for minds like yours, the ones who don't fit, who don't follow, and who refuse to live on someone else's script. Drop a like if you felt seen, because every click tells me you're part of that rare breed that thrives outside the noise. Leave a comment and let me know which sign hit you hardest. I read them all, and your insights fuel the next conversations we'll have here. And of course, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, whether to wake them up or to remind them they're not crazy for being different. This isn't just a channel. It's a space where the uncommon finally makes sense. So subscribe, stay connected, and let's keep building something most people will never understand. But you always will.